Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode on the show, Control or Be Controlled, podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. And I remain your host, Darlington. Today's guest is Chris. Co-authors actually is we are supposed to have Katie and Chris on the show, but right now we have only Chris. So Chris and Katie, they are co-authors of Coloring Outside the Lines, a love story in the grey of addiction, recovery, and redemption. A powerful two-voice memoir that reached number one new release status in 5 categories during its first week. Chris was a successful entrepreneur whose life did not fit the stereotypical image many people associate with addiction. From the outside, everything appeared successful, but behind the scenes, addiction nearly cost him his life twice. Chris, welcome to Control or Be Controlled.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so I would like you to also add to that introduction.
Yeah, happy to. About just a little bit about me.
Yes.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, that kind of sums it up in a nutshell. But I, I guess I would just say that well, Katie and I have been married we've been together for 10 years. 5 years married in September, but 10 years together. But we also actually went to the same high school, and we're in the same grade. So I've known her since I was about 15 or so. We've known each other, but we just didn't, run in the same circles, if you will. And it wasn't until our 10-year high school reunion and, after college that we started hanging out more, and our friends, my friends and her friends all kind of knew each other. And so we kept running into each other more and more. And our 10-year high school reunion came along, and we just kind of hit it off, and the rest was history, which was a blessing, because I don't think that any earlier in life that she would have given me the time of day. But um, yeah, at that point in time, I think we were both 26 ish, and 26 and 27. And at that point, I had already been, I was 12 or so years into my career. I owned my own business. I did really well with it. And, my personal life, I felt like I was kind of thriving, and it almost feels like I had summited, or I'd obtained this, individual best peak, if you will, at the time that we got together. And where our story, the book that is like that story, where that kind of begins is about 3 or 4 years into our relationship. We were engaged, about to be married when it started, and when it got really bad, my addiction, that is, was about a year after we got married. So it started with an innocent injury and prescription that I was provided. And not to get too long-winded on it, but ultimately that led to medicating more of my stuff that I was dealing with at the time. Like I said, everything was going really well when we met, but about 4 or 5 years in, I sold my business, changed jobs, and then we had COVID. We sold our house. We had just so much going on. And then being isolated from my community is right around the time that I broke my foot and was provided this prescription. But what I noticed is it started treating my emotional and mental, ailments more than physical. And that's kind of what, the straw was that broke the camel's back, if you will. That's where it began.
Right, Chris, thank you so much.
Of
So I
course.
have some questions here for you, and I would like us to
Sure.
get into them.
Yeah.
So your book explores addiction not just as an individual struggle, but as something that impacts an entire relationship. Tell us how addiction changed the emotional ecosystem between two people?
Yeah. Well, it's I don't even know if change is the right word because it just became an entirely different ecosystem. So, I'm years away from this, but it's still, you're who you are on the inside. It's hesitant to even go back there sometimes. But um, I would say that what changed the most was obviously with me. In the beginning of our relationship, I was so forward thinking. I was thinking so far into the future and what things would look like and how it would appear. And I really cared about those things. And I think that most addiction, most people that are suffering from addiction, really the substance is just the medicine or the remedy, And so um, it's really that's just how the addict is dealing with whatever it is that's really bothering them. They're choosing to numb or escape or what have you for some reason. So for a while, I think that I was trying to escape the changes that were organically happening in my house and trying to adjust to life as this quote unquote married couple in America. And what that was supposed to look like from the outside, when on the inside I was just unraveling. I put an enormous amount of pressure on myself, when come to find out I didn't need to. We got married. I married her and she married me for the person or persons that we were, and we weren't expecting, she wasn't expecting me to change or achieve something greater than I already had. Um, and so, which is it's all well and good, but I also expected that of myself. So I think the biggest change in our house, in our ecosystem, if you will, like it was her watching me become less confident in how I attacked life in general. That was probably the most subtle, one of the most subtle things. She just noticed that I was less confident, less secure, less, and it, and I'm sure that it was for many reasons. And then over time, it was because of the addiction itself. If it goes on long enough, it stops becoming the remedy and starts becoming the problem. And that's when you can kind of define it as addiction, I think. So she basically just saw me shrink, becoming less of myself. And if I'm being honest, when you're in active addiction and you don't want to be anymore, which I think most addicts will understand, you start using as a remedy to something. And eventually, when it becomes the problem itself, it takes over your whole life. And it becomes a personal battle with survival. And unfortunately, Katie had taken a back seat to that because it becomes your full-time job, trying to navigate how many pills or how many drinks or whatever your ailment is, whatever your addiction is, how many you have left and how long they're going to last you. And you start, you know, you're driving all over the place for one thing, but it's everything and it just consumes you. And when you're single, that's fine if that's how you want to spend your time, but I wasn't. And I had somebody to answer to. And when she didn't like when she didn't like what she was hearing, which she didn't, the instinct was initially to lie, and it was such an easy thing to do when in active addiction because it becomes survival. I need this to get up. I need this to go to that big meeting. I need this to, it starts becoming the replacement tool for everything and the excuse that everything's not going your way. So I know that's a really broad description, but I would say that was probably, yeah, the biggest change I can identify with.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah.
Looking back, tell us one thing each of you misunderstood about the other. during the hardest seasons of addiction?
Her. Yeah, she really wanted to be here for this. If she were, I've, she's told me this before. While we were going through this together, everything that we learned was new to us. We knew what addiction was. We probably had people in our life that we knew were going through it, but this was the first time either of us had any idea or had such a direct involvement with the process. So for her, she would say education was just something that, and resources. She just kind of had this idea that once I finally got the help that I needed, that once I was out of their care or after inpatient, rehabilitation, that there was going to be a plan that, we would be provided all the steps and all the information that we would need to continue to get better and stay better. And I think, I'd say that was her biggest misconception, and I shared that with her because it was an entirely different world, one that we were not familiar with. You have to learn all the acronyms, you have to learn all these things, and everybody that is in addiction, they're all unique individuals. So it's they try to blanket and help as many people as possible and reach as many addicts as possible through these programs and everything. But, and that was probably my biggest misconception, was that, you hear of the steps, through Alcoholics Anonymous, you hear of, inpatient, outpatient, rehabilitation, trauma, group therapy. You learn about all these therapies and programs. And that was my biggest misconception, is that I was just going to be able to do what they said, and I would just inherently get better. And it was a little more complicated than that for me. Oh, are you there? Looks like you're on mute if you can hear me. Oh, I hear you.
All right, Chris. So you were successful and didn't fit the traditional image many people have of someone struggling with addiction. How did that make it easier to hide the problem? Yes. I
Sorry
said,
about that. I didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
okay. How did that make it easier to hide the problem and harder to confront it?
Yeah, that's a huge part of this for me. It was, unfortunately, that's the perfect storm, right? For anyone that's in addiction. When it becomes, if you're somebody that is more seen or visible and, just in the community or public setting, it kind of makes it easier to hide behind, I guess you could say, just hide behind your image. You are working so hard on your reputation. You're working so hard building your network of people around you that are successful as well. And that's a double-edged sword, because everybody wants that. I don't believe that there's very few situations where anyone can achieve their best version of themselves in work or with their career or whatever they're choosing to do, their way of getting that fulfillment. It's very hard for any individual to do alone. So, and especially with what I did for work, I had to be surrounded with the best people at what they did, both personally and with their careers, individually, professionally. And so I spent all of my adult life up to that point in the public's eye. And I painted a picture of myself that I liked, and I worked really, really hard. And eventually I met that picture. I looked a certain way, I dressed a certain way, I showed up a certain time or didn't. And I had a reputation for being good at what I was doing. And eventually it got easier to do. And so when the issues that were under the surface of my addiction started really, really, digging into me, and it was kind of unraveling me, the last thing I wanted to do was let that affect what I had just worked the past 15 years to achieve, which was my reputation and my image and my business. And I was of the opinion that I couldn't ask for help because and genuinely, there wasn't a lot of people that I felt I could bring this to, where I wouldn't be judged and I wouldn't be or seen as weak or lesser than, or worse. I also didn't want to be understood. I kind of felt like I could deal with this on my own, and I didn't. What I learned was what you just asked is, because of everything I worked so hard for 15 years to achieve, that wasn't going to unravel in a day. My reputation and how I saw myself and how others saw me wasn't going to unravel in a day. So I was able to almost like hide in plain sight. My addiction was to opiates. Opiates, pills in general, are small. They're easily concealed. And, I was at a point where I was dedicating 100% of my life to my career and my business. And so I didn't drink. I didn't do other drugs. And so when this came along and into my life, that was the only thing I did. And when I realized it was so easy to hide, and it became this risk reward situation. And yeah, I just think that because I kind of gave off this persona that I always had everything under control and I was always good. And truthfully, I had everything to be grateful for at that point. It just didn't, it just didn't change the fact that I was hurting on the inside. So I would say that, it just gave me this invisibility, if you will. And so I kept people at an arm's length and distance. And when I saw them, I put on a face, to try to give the impression that I was as good as I ever was. And for a while, I think that worked until it absolutely just didn't. So.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. So, addiction often creates cycles of secrecy, fear, and broken trust. What were some of the hardest parts of building honesty and safety in your relationship?
My relationship when we were going through addiction, or our relation, I guess it's kind of the same thing now. I think those are the heart of any relationship, no matter who you are. Secrecy, the other flip side of that is honesty, right? And so, unfortunately, when you get to that place when you're in addiction and you are in survival, meaning, and I've been there, and I would imagine that many would relate that have been there, where you start using a substance as, like I said, an escape, or to numb, or to fill that void. Just when you hit that point of overwhelm, and for everybody, I'm sure that's different. But for me, with Katie, I had always led our relationship with honesty, and so did she. And we both did it very well, and sometimes a little too well. And so I think that that was probably the biggest blow, is the lack of honesty, or the secrecy. So I was always busy with work and always running around, going to appointments, meeting clients in their home, at the office. And so I was always on the move. And so for a long time, I had been able to kind of get around and meet people. And when the addiction started factoring into that, it was really easy for me to be out and about and get these things. But when COVID came along, and that's when things got worse, and I wasn't meeting with people, and I was still going out and doing these things, that's when kind of Katie's red flag went off. And I think that's when how dishonest I had become, not to the point where I can even say dishonest. I was just lying. And it was I say only, it was strictly about my addiction. But the way that if she were here, she would frame it is it's no different than infidelity. It's no different than adultery, cheating, you know? And for me, I guess, you know, I guess you could say it that way, that I had cheated on her with drugs. I wasn't honest with her about any aspect of it. I didn't tell her that I was meeting people. I didn't tell her I was looking to source it out. I wasn't looking for them. I didn't tell her any of that. And I didn't tell her, you know, that it had gotten bad. I didn't tell her, you know, that I was struggling. And then when it got to the point where I didn't enjoy it anymore and I really didn't want them in my life and I couldn't break free from that, when I tried to go my first day without taking it, that's when you start lying to yourself. So there's a double layered secrecy going on. I'm lying to her, but I'm also lying to myself. You wake up every day optimistic that, you know, maybe today's the day that I can suffer through it. And if I could just get to tonight and into tomorrow, you know, maybe I can break free. And unfortunately, with how frequent and how serious it had become, I couldn't physically do it. And so lying had almost become my only option. And it absolutely shattered our relationship. We went from being best friends, husband and wife, newly married, to kind of coexisting in this really bleak world. And it was sad, you know, and unfortunately it wasn't intentional. I didn't want to hurt her with it, but, what's that saying, you know, people can forgive what you do, but they might not ever forget, you know, how you make them feel. And as forgiving and genuinely unconditional as Katie has been, I know that she struggles with that to this day, because in a way, for a long time, I had betrayed her. So, and we still struggle with that, you know. It's obviously gotten a lot better, as everything does when you move on from actively taking things and abusing substances in addiction. But yeah, it's difficult. So
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. So you talk
sure.
about connection as medicine. What did genuine connection look like for you when your relationship felt like the most broken?
Oh, what did connection look like when it was the most broken? You know, I don't know why this just came to me, but well, so Katie and I we've always kind of, behind closed doors, always have said that we have, and I'm sure every couple does, have this unspoken relationship, right? Like, you have your relationship and how it appears to the world, which is one thing, but like how it is when you two in the relationship are the only people around each other for most of the time. And that is the case in our case. And so, the connection that we had that was unspoken, where we could finish each other's sentences, we could read each other, um, all those beautiful things that it takes a really long time to develop in any relationship of any kind, really, where you think you know the person. Um, that connection was completely severed. And unfortunately for me, it was severed over time, because, you know, when you're in active addiction, you're not thinking of anyone first. You're not thinking of yourself first. You're not thinking of your partner first. And, you know, but Katie was always thinking of me. And at some point, when she realized that the connection was severed and that unspoken relationship was, um, felt lost, and she realized that it was because of this, that was really hard. So, yeah, the connection was broken. It was non-existent for a while. But the good news is I mean, literally, I think the first morning I woke up in rehab and I was sober. That was the first day that we started to rebuild that, and it's possible. So, um, lost but not forgotten, I would say. And I think at this point we can say that um, it's been restored, and it's all the better for it.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. So,
Ooh, that's a really good question. Uh, Man, I feel like I could answer that in so many ways. That's a great question. I think for us as a couple, the hardest season that we went through was obviously this. And I think what would surprise a lot of people from maybe the outside looking in, or maybe it won't, but this is what I would say is um, we just got done talking about that unspoken language that you have with your person. And so I think what would surprise them the most is, at the time, even though we were all going through COVID worldwide and how hard that was, and we were away from a lot of people, both Katie and I had such an amazing community around us, our family, our friends. Like, I, I'm biased because they're our family and our friends, but I think that between the two of us, the people we had in our lives were some of the most genuine, or are some of the most genuine people around. So I think what would surprise a lot of people is you have all these people that care about you around you. Well, why didn't you just tell them the truth? And why didn't you just come forward? And why didn't you just get the help sooner? And, you know, um, I kick myself now thinking the same thing. But I think a lot of people would be surprised just how difficult that was for me as a man in my situation to do. I don't know why, but asking for help is just probably the hardest thing for me. So yeah, I think most people would be, surprised to know that we were in such a good situation and environment with so many people around that cared, and we battled it for a lot longer on our own and a lot longer on my own than we needed to. Once you surrender and like make peace with temporary, and I mean temporary, embarrassment for your future back, the possibility of it, you have, it's such a relief. You kind of wonder, why did it take me so long? So yeah.
all right, Chris. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful episode. I know that it would have
Yeah,
been much better as well if Katie was here with you.
sure.
Well,
She
thank
does
you.
make everything better.
Thank you for sharing such an honest and vulnerable conversation about addiction, recovery, love, and redemption. Your story shows that addiction
Absolutely.
does not only affect the person struggling, it affects families, relationships, and the people trying to hold everything together. But it also shows that healing is possible when there's honesty, connection, accountability, and a willingness to face what has been. So, for those who want to connect with you, those who are maybe probably trying to be on this journey with you, who are trying to get out of addiction, and they would like to connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, I'd love that. And I completely agree with what you just said. And thank you for that. I think the best way to get in touch with us, and we'd love to hear from anyone that is struggling, or anyone that is struggling to love somebody that is struggling, we call it the Anchor and Adrift, but you can find us always on our website. It's just lovethroughthegray.com. And that is also our handle for all social media. Um, and gray, we spell it with an A, so Gray. But yeah, please reach out.
All right, once again, thank you so much. And thank you to all my listeners for tuning in today for Control or Be Controlled. If this episode impacted you, share it with someone who may need to hear this message, and leave a review to help others discover the show. Remember, the hardest season of life does not have to be the end of your story. The choices you make today can shape the person you become tomorrow. So until next time, I will see you guys again. Take control or be controlled. Bye, guys. Thank you, Chris. And say hello to Katie for me.
Cheers. I will. Thank you.